I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about training with power. I'm one of these guys that kind of been around for long enough to have been riding with no speedo and then gone to speedo and then heart rate monitor with an actual cable from the strap itself down to the watch, and to then go and towards what we are using today in terms of heart rate monitors and training with power. And it's been an interesting journey to watch the development of all these training methods from back when you used to go and feel, which is something that I still am a firm believer of. All the training methods that we have today and all of the tools to record power, heart rate, speed and everything else is very, very good. But I still believe that it's a good idea to sort of understand how you feel when you're doing specific wattage. So still today, some of the training rides I go out with the monitor taped over or stick it in my back pocket and try and hit the same kind of target zones that I need to be doing and I can do on when I got the numbers in front of me. But going towards power and using power, that happened for me back in 2001, 2002 when I picked up the first power meter. Still at that point, like probably most of you guys today, sort of wondering, what do I do with all these cool numbers that are coming up on the screen, and what do we actually understand about training with power? And back then there wasn't an awful lot of coaches either to sort of help you with what to do with the numbers that you got around. But as I started to understand what it could actually do to me and what the difference was between training with power and training with relative to heart rate, it just came down to basically proving that heart rate fluctuates massively. Whether you ate well, slept well, when you ate, when you slept, if you've had a hard day at work and you're going out training, all of these things are going to affect your heart rate. So if you eat very, very close to a training ride, your heart rate is not going to go up as high as it should be. If you had a good night's sleep, your heart rate will go sky high. If you've had a bad night's sleep, it won't respond at all. Power stays constant regardless of whether you're tired, whether you're fit, unfit, how much you've slept, well, whatever the conditions are, 1 watt is always going to be 1 watt, which means it's a very accurate form of measuring what you're doing on the bike. It's kind of an interesting sort of way of working out then, and I'm going to pull an example here actually. So 2006, Tour of Spain, penultimate stage was a time trial. Now I know my FTP, functional threshold power, which is effectively what you can hold for an hour, is 520 watts at that time. So that morning, heart rate monitor on, because we're coming towards the back end of a Grand Tour. I need to know what the heart rate is doing, if it's responding, and how it's responding specifically for my warm-up. So do the progressions, heart rate goes up to 146 beats a minute, can't get any higher. Automatically then you think, okay, reset the system, back off, warm up again, bring it back up, try and slowly push it higher and higher and higher, and still topped out at 146 beats a minute. So I'm already at that point thinking, okay, end of story, I'm not going to be able to do anything on the bike today, I might as well just ride around. But I thought, okay, time trials, I love them, let's just give it everything I got anyway. I came back on that 21 kilometer time trial with an average of 540 watts, which tells you that your body can produce power in many different ways, just like a car. You can have a 2-litre turbo engine produce the same as a massive V8, just different ways of doing it. So that, to me, at that point, really geared me massively towards the power. What can we do to improve that? How often should we do all the tests? Do we need to do them in a lab? If you've got an accurate enough power meter, I think you can do all of that yourself. To me, every month, a 20-minute test, go out, same roads, and just go flat out for 20 minutes, record the power, come back, have a look at that, take 5% off what that number was, and I know where my FTP is. that gives you also a very easy way of understanding whether you are progressing with your training, whether you're getting stronger, fitter, better, or whether you're keeping at the same level as you were. So for me, that's kind of the best way forward. And ultimately, if you're looking at comparison levels to getting into lab and having tests done, I think as an amateur rider, is becoming a little bit it feels a bit alien to going into a lab to do tests to see whether I'm getting better and better. And ultimately, a very cost ineffective way of doing it as well. Where if you're getting the power meter on your bike, then you know it's always going to be there. You can do your test. You can then use that test to train and progress and make your life, should we call it, far more specific for the amount of time that you have available to yourself to train. Does that make sense? So right now, I've gone from obviously racing my bike, as probably most of you know, I raced professionally for 13 years, had a bit of a gap, came back, ran a team for a couple of years, and then have since made my way in towards Ironmans, and over the last 2 years now, I've made a plan to go and try and qualify go from not having ever done a triathlon in my life to qualify to go to Kona, and then go to Kona and be competitive in the age group categories. And that transition has been specifically very, very interesting with in terms of training with the power meter on, and understanding what that training has done to my body. I've effectively had to detrain the very top end of my power output and try and sort of move that down and put that into what I now like to call Ironman level of riding. And I don't think would have been able to get to the point where I am today with my Ironmans if I hadn't been able to record and understand what the data was doing, and analyze all that after every ride. Another thing, so I'm using the InfoCranks. That's been out on the market now for about just over a year, mainly because we've got bilateral power. And for an Ironman or any triathlete, obviously, running is not particularly good for your cycling legs, right? They just don't go hand in hand. And being able to get the pedal balance, the torque efficiency, which is effectively how good you are using the power that you're applying into the cranks, has been quite a good tool of measuring how much damage the run is doing to my bike riding, but also whether I'm starting to pick up any kind of smaller injuries, any smaller imbalances in my body. So for instance, now I know that a longer run, a 20-kilometer run in an afternoon session, will have an effect on me the day after when I get out on the bike. My left leg just doesn't work the way it should. I'm dropping off. I'm usually riding about 48.8 to 50.2 in terms of pedal balance. Day after a big run, I'm down to 44, 45 on the left leg. So straight away, I thought, okay, hang on a minute. This is something that's clearly, if I ride this into my system now and just keep on pedaling like I'm not known before, never understood that I had that issue, in a month's time, 2 months' time, I'm going to be at the physio for a good couple of weeks, potentially being out injured and not being able to train for a number of weeks. But by just being able to click my right foot out, pedal with one leg for about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, clip back in again, and the pedal balance comes back up again. It's just a muscle activation issue, and that's kept me so far, touch wood, health and fit, and being able to train as much as I do. But I thought, rather than me standing here rambling on about what I've done in terms of training and how, going and covering sort of grounds that you potentially already know, I'd much rather open up the floor to sort of questions about power, training with power, all these kind of things, so you guys get a bit more out of the session rather than me covering. Let's start with you then.
Have you found a difference between the cranks and other power meters?
Yes, definitely. The difference in accuracy is second to none, and the fact that we're able to measure more data points per second and actually measure the wattage rather than calculating it means that the cranks stay true to themselves, to any other crank. So if you've got more than one bike and you're in a position to have more than one power meter, then you know that the watts are going to be the same whether you're riding that bike or that bike. And I think that's kind of a key thing for all of us, is to have a power meter that stays solid the whole way through, and there's no temperature drift or any drift in wattage, no calibration issues. Effectively, we just want to bang the cranks on the bike and go out and ride and know that they're going to stay the same all the time.
And is it designed to change between bikes, or?
Easy to change between the bikes, no problem at all. With the current version of the crank, practice bottom bracket in your bike, and it's quicker to change the cranks over than it is to change a pair of pedals over. This is one screw right there, pull them out, plug them back in, tighten up as tight as you can. Can't over tighten, you can't do anything wrong with it, so it is literally a plug and play. So.
I'm going to ask, you talked a lot about power for training in terms of the actual race, Ironman racing.
Yeah.
You know, how critical do you find it there? Because I mean, sometimes that was related to my question about between bikes and wheels. If you've got a hub sort of power meter, then it's a bit of a problem if you end up using a different wheel in the race. That
is very true, and I personally use the power very strictly on all my races. I found that certainly the first couple of Ironmans that I did, I ended up coming out of the transition as quite still a very slow swimmer. There was a lot of people around me. I just wanted to get clear of all the traffic as quickly as possible, so just tipped the shift down a bit and kind of went for it, which, going back analysing, I was doing a 50k time trial flat out, and then dealing with the after effects of that for about another 30-40k, and then sort of settling into my riding style towards the back end of the Ironman ride, which meant over the first two events that I did, I came into the run probably a bit tired, which meant obviously I didn't run as fast. So being able to, knowing what your FTP is, knowing what you can do over an Ironman ride, and obviously it's something that, or any triathlon really, knowing what you're capable of doing, collecting the data from races, from training, is kind of key to evaluate. But and also, I think the race element, that's kind of where you learn the most about yourself, and you learn the most about what you can actually produce, because once you've got that number on you, the red mist comes down, and you usually tend to put out a little bit more power, and you're more...
Because actually choosing what percentage of your FTP is going to be right is going to be somewhat varies from person to person. If you're a strong bike rider, or if you're a strong runner, we're never going to really be able to... I can't run to the same pace. If we were to sort of take FTP into running, I can't run to the same percentage of my FTP as a strong runner can do. Whereas a strong runner can't ride to the same percentage of FTP as I can do. In Ironman now then, what percentage roughly are you going for?
I'm currently going around about 90% of my FTP. Closer to, well, when I'm really going good, 95% of it. So, the norm power tends to be, for me, just over 400 watts at the moment.
How do you work that out?
So, the FTP, you work out, you basically take your bike out, find a clear stretch of road or a turbo trainer, go flat out for 20 minutes, record what you're getting for that 20-minute piece, take 5% off it, and you got your FTP. Off the back of that, then you've got to then realise, okay, how many hours can I do per week on the bike for training leading into the events that I'm doing? Based on that, it's more of a sort of an understanding of your own capabilities rather than a scientific figure. I can't tell you to take 20% off or 10% off, because 20% off might be too much for taking too much off for you. Whereas if you went in to ride at 5% off your FTP like I'm trying to do, that could potentially put you in a point where you'll have to walk the run. So it's understanding your numbers, understanding what you effectively can do with them, and finding your sweet spot.
So there is no sort of...
There is, like with all training, you can't train to my numbers, I can't train to your numbers, because we can't, it doesn't correspond. So it's for you to understand And I mean, I tend to do, the training that I do is all based on 20-minute efforts, whether it's for a test or whether it's for actual training benefits. Any shorter intervals, for me personally, I find not really that useful because I'm not really doing any VO2 efforts on an Ironman. I'm staying well clear of that zone. So the majority of my rides are, if I'm doing a 3-hour ride, it's two 20-minute efforts in those 3 hours. If it's a 5-hour ride, then I'm doing 3 to 4 20-minute efforts into that. And then at certain points, I've just got 180k of full gas as hard as I can go to, again, collect more data to understand what my engine is capable of at this given point. So I'm sort of, I'll have a run off that then. Yeah, pretty much every longer bike ride I do, I tend to have a run off the back of it.
How did you find the adaptation to running?
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Since when I picked this up, the last time I ran was 1993. So it was very much a question of just understanding, like, getting the fitness, getting the conditioning right, and slowly picking up the distances and the pace and all the rest of it. I'm still far from running to my full capability. If you're looking at what the engine is capable of.
Did you just have a run focus block for a while?
Most of the time for me, I can't just have a run focus block.
When you start.
It was just running whenever I could run and making sure that I was 100% recovered from each run. Same as when you're coming into your training, the recovery, on the bike, the recovery is as important as the training is. And with that, again, like the numbers that you can get on the bike are so quantifiable that you can see with the training stress scores, which measures the intensity versus the time you're spending on the bike. You can understand when you're on the borderline of getting overtrained, gives you clear warning sign. You can back off and recover. Actually, let your body soak up the training, rather than just keep on pushing, which is so easy to do if you're not understanding exactly what effect the training is having on you. So, staying injury-free and staying sharp and well rested all the time is as important as it is to punch out the big numbers.
Can you describe some of the indicators that you take into factor to avoid overtraining?
Some of the
indicators that you use?
Well, I'm still very much looking at my heart rate in the morning when I wake up. A big sort of factor then when I'm sort of looking at my heart rate. I know 35 is my solid beat at the moment. Going up a couple of beats, and I know that I'm starting to get tired. And then when I know I'm starting to get tired, and I keep wearing the heart rate monitor on the bike as well, and on the run, and if the heart rate is not responding, then straight away I know I'm starting to get overtrained. If you're looking at purely bike training, and like I said, if you've got a power meter, then you are able to see the training stress score, and that will give you over time an indicator as well of when you are starting to get overtrained. There are certain parameters that you can sort of go, okay, if I run up more than 600 TSS points over a period of 4 days, then I'm probably going to start getting to the point where I'm a bit too, I've been on it too much, and just back off and recover and so on.
Did you cut your training out completely, or just do it like recovery?
No, I definitely have one complete day off a week. Let your body recover, soak up all the training, and then get back on it again. So double sessions every day, 6 days a week, and then 1 day completely off. I believe that your body needs that recovery. Certainly, when you're at the moment, I'm trying to put between 30 and 35 hours of training in a week. I need that day to let my body kind of get back to square one again, and again, it's as much about staying injury-free and healthy as it is to put the big hours in. Yeah.
So for your Ironman time, I guess the two components are the FTP and the percentage of that.
Yeah.
So how does the training for improving those two pieces differ?
So the training to get any Ironman time, improve your Ironman time on a bike, it's really coming down to what is to me the bread and butter interval, and that is a 20-minute FTP type of sessions. So if you were to calculate it, say at the moment I'm hitting about 460, 470 FTP. So I'm giving myself a margin there of around about 40 to 50 watts, 10, 15 watts over, and the rest of it below. And that's kind of, I go out and I do these 20-minute efforts, and I'm hitting in that window every single time, just staying in that window and making sure that I hit that. And it's a session that you can do very easily on a turbo. So if you are time constrained, those 20-minute efforts, jump on a turbo, 10-minute warm up, smash 20 minutes, 5-minute rest in between, smash another 20 minutes, warm down, and you're done. And that is a very good session. If you can run that 2 or 3 times a week, I can guarantee you that you will improve massively.
Even for Ironman do that?
Even for Ironman. Any time on the bike is better than no time on the bike. So even if you can't go out and do 3, 4, 5, 6 hour rides, if you're coming back from work one day and you got an hour window of doing a session, that session is going to take you progressively forward in a very strong way. So that is, very, very important.
How many times a week do you do that?
Me? None, because I hate riding the turbo. I'll go out in the rain. and I'm very fortunate to be able to train pretty much full time. So I use daylight hours to go out and train, but 2 or 3 times a week if you can, great. And then have a longer rise on the weekend. Sorry.
How do you balance that with endurance rides, like softer pace?
So softer pace, I don't really do softer pace rides. When I say so, softer pace is you got there I see 5 different zones. Your recovery zone 1, your base pace, which is zone 2. Then we got no man's land, which I call it, which is zone 3, which is where you kind of end up with if you're doing road racing, for instance, that's where you end up with your average powering. Ironman races is going to be right at the top end of that. You've got your zone 4, which is your FTP, and then zone 5, which is your VO2. Right. So my training rides, whether it's 2 hours of just nice and steady, which is going to be my baseline speed, zone 2, still hovering around about 20, 21, 22 miles an hour, and doing a 6, 7, 8 hour ride, the baseline speed is still going to be in that zone 2, all the intervals in zone 4. So very rarely do I go out and just sit and just pedal my bike around, because effectively if I go out and ride under zone 2 or bottom end of zone 2, in my book I might as well sit at home, Well, a good PlayStation game or something like that probably get me more excited.
Isn't that not a recovery ride though?
Well, there are recovery rides, but that's a different thing. That's a different thing. That's not a training ride. A training ride, you're going out and you've got a specific thing that you're setting out to do. Otherwise, you're going for a recovery ride with your mates down the coffee shop and you do recover. And that's something that I would say leading into an Ironman. If you take the day before, I would always do a bit of an opener session where I'm doing an hour and a half on the bike and I'm bringing myself up to a nice working rate a couple of times, dropping back off before I'm building up in the lactic acid. Day before that, so if you're racing on a Saturday, Friday you've got an opening session, Thursday you're doing a very, very easy ride, like I said, recovery ride, if you ride at all, and then you're going back from that. So that final week you probably do have a couple of recovery rides built into your system. Alternatively, if you feel like, okay, my day off, I still fancy going out, weather is nice, do a recovery ride in zone 1, bottom end of zone 2. But everything else, make sure that you have a target that you're going out training for. Otherwise, what's the point? It's like, you have a specific amount of hours set aside for your training, which I think I can probably say for everyone in the room. If you're going for something, you're doing this to become better, okay, I've got 8 hours available to me per week. Then make those 8 hours a week count and do them as strictly and as well as you can possibly do them planned out. And I can guarantee you, power and working to the power will take you further forward in terms of your ability on the bike than it will, getting you bits and bobs that might look like you're going fast. It's, I think, long-term investment and much a very, very strong suggestion to look into it.
When you're training on the turbo, do you find there's a different perception of effort and in the numbers?
In my book, yes, massively. I struggle very, very much with any turbo rides, mainly because of I've had some horrific injuries through my racing career, where I've ended up spending 2, 3, maybe 4 months even on the turbo training, doing an hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half in the evening. Now, over a 4-month period, you can imagine what that's going to do to your head and how much you're going to end up loving that machine that's standing in the garage. So for me, any time I have to go on the turbo trainer is a massive mental effort, and regardless of how I do it. But in terms of feel, yes, it feels like it's harder to do an interval on a turbo trainer than it does out on the road, because you've got more factors playing into it when you're out there, a bit of wind on you, and it just makes it that bit easier.
I mean, because I've done, I'm lucky enough to have a power meter, and doing VO2 max for maybe 8 minutes
Yeah.
on the road, on a hill,
Yeah.
you get much bigger numbers than I ever can in the garage.
Yeah. And part of that comes down to pedaling technique as well. So if I told you, for instance, if we put you on these cranks right now and went out riding, my guess is that you'd probably pedal around about 65 to 70% on your torque efficiency. So that's coming down to how much of the power that you put into your bike are you, throughout the 360 degrees are you actually using, or are you creating negative torque? Meaning that if I'm pressing down on this crank, are you pulling that foot out of the way, or are you actually pushing that foot up into the air? Which means if you're putting 200 watts into that crank, but you're dragging your leg on that one by 100 watts, effectively there's only 100 watts going into the bike. Now, riding on an incline is much, much easier, because you end up with a lower cadence, you end up actually working the pedals and the cranks the way they should work and the way you should pedal. So pretty much anyone, even myself, I will have far better torque efficiency going up a climb than I will on a flat bit of road or on a turbo trainer. But to me, that's something that has been a revolutionary tool for me over the last year now, since I've been using these cranks, is that the fact that I can see how much I'm using my legs and in what position I'm using them, and if I'm actually being a bit of a lazy bugger and not pulling my feet out of the way, and just understanding how effective I am with my pedal stroke. There's no point in being super strong and putting 300 watts, 400 watts, 500 watts into that one crank if that one's not coming out of the way and helping it. And I thought I was a good pedaler. I'm riding around on a full-on Ironman effort around about 93%, but being a perfectionist, 93% is not 100, which means there's still room for improvement.
Slight follow-up question.
Yeah.
How important would you say it is to people, if they're training with a power meter that has the ability to measure left and right independence, to work on that balance?
Working on the balance is, I think, key for anyone. It also comes down to the balance on your bike, and the balance of your pedal stroke and the power that you produce can also come back to bike fitting. How are you set up on your bike? I put my daughter on these cranks a while back, and straight away saw that there was something not quite right, because her power on the backstroke pedaling up was virtually non-existent. And I mean, she's a strong girl, and I know she can pedal right. So we played around with her position, and all of a sudden we managed to find a good 10-15% on the backstroke by just moving the saddle around, moving the position around. Ultimately, she still needs to understand and learn how to pedal and start using your hamstrings and glutes a bit more. But yes, the balance is, I think, very important. It's going to drop you lopsided, cause injuries and stuff like that. So I think over time, over the coming years, we've only just had a couple of power measurement units come out with bilateral power. I think that is now going to be the norm for the industry going forward. Why measure one leg? You know, we want both legs, right? And I want to know what both legs are doing and how efficient they are. So, and coming down the accuracy of it as well. You know, the industry standard, which is that 1-2% plus minus. I mean, just, you know, knock me back if I'm wrong here, but if your boss paid you 2% less than next month, you wouldn't be too happy, would you? So why expect something different with the crank that's going, you know, with the tools that are effectively going to make that 8-hour window of training that you've got count at the back end of it. You're spending all that money entering the events and training camps, maybe other equipment, all the rest of it, sacrificing family time with the kids, all the rest of it. Make sure that it's all tight. Whether it's your program, your planning, the accuracy of your equipment that you're using. That's it. Any more questions? Yeah?
To get the maximum power meter, do you think it's essential to get a coach?
I think getting a coach is a good thing. Effectively, you can, you know, go and get yourself into a whole bunch of seminars and understanding and learning. There's an awful lot of reading that you can do online to start understanding what you need to do, what you should do with the power meter, and how to evaluate the numbers that you do see. So I think you can teach yourself to a large extent what to do with it, and I think it's an interesting thing that what you come into here. Just having the numbers on the screen on your bike and looking at, you know, how much are you doing? I'm doing this. Not really what it's for. It's what you can do with these numbers that's going to make you improve on your bike ride. Not how much you're putting out comparison to your mate. He might, you know, be a completely different build to you, use a completely different power meter to you, which so far is, you know, depending on what brand you're using, it's all going to be all over the shop. So the coach, I think it's more coming down to, if you pay someone to give you a training program to do a specific job for you, is clearly set aside a certain amount of time, and you know if you follow that program, you are going to improve. So it's always easier if you've got someone to report back to, saying, yes, I've done that right, I'm good, I you know, put that up on Training Peaks or Strava or whatever it is that, you know, platform you're using for evaluating your data. Coach is looking at it and goes, yes, great, today we did this and this and this, tomorrow we go out and do that. You know, it's about that sort of honesty to yourself or versus your coach. And yeah, like I said, if you need to report back with what's come out of these buggers, then you can't cheat the system. Got any other questions, anyone? All right. In that case, thanks for listening.